like we'll say always, I want to grow this so I can reach more people with this message. And at some point it turns into, I want to reach people with a message so I can grow this.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Center for Public Speaking webinar, where we're going to be examining how to manage your time to maximize your impact. My name is Daniel Gilman. I'm the founder and president of the Center for Public Speaking. I'm here with my dear friend and colleague at the center, my fellow coach in public speaking, Alonzo Julian Paul.
Hello, everyone. Alonzo here. Thank you so much for joining us, for tuning in wherever you are, carving out that space. We are so curious to know where you're from. So please, in the chat box, type in real quick, where are you tuning in from? I'm from Langley, BC right now, and we'd love to know where you're at.
So Alonzo's coming in from Langley, the west coast of Canada. I'm coming in from Niagara Falls area, also in Canada. Alonzo mentioned the chat box. Make sure that you put the chat is for everyone. Otherwise, it just goes to the panelists, but we'd love everyone to get to meet you. And then I also want to highlight that in addition to that chat box, there's also a Q&A box. And even now you can start submitting your questions. And halfway through this 1 hour webinar, we're going to start asking your questions to the speakers today. Well, this webinar was actually birthed by a conversation first with Alonzo when Dr. Sean McDowell was with us about a month ago for our webinar with Justin Briley. The webinar ended, and I called Alonzo because he's one of my best friends, just to debrief and share about how much we loved it. Alonzo was saying,
it was incredible, everyone. I was just blown away as a public speaker. I do this for a living, and I was blown away at how on earth does this guy do everything that he does? How is he crushing it on so many different levels, whether it's social media or producing video content, writing books, giving talks, writing articles, blogs, and at the same time also being somebody that actually has a healthy family and healthy home. So I needed to pick this guy's brain.
I think the words Alonzo actually said was, Daniel, how does Sean just be crushing it every single day? That man's a stud. And I thought, man's correct. So I texted a question like that to Sean just to ask him a bit about time management. Just I thought, quick question. He said, give me a call. So I phoned him while Sean was driving, and he graciously was answering all my questions as I was throwing all the stuff at him about how he manages his time and organizes his life. My wife and I just had our first baby, and we are finding it very hard to try to be excellent in our work, but also present for our baby and each other and devotions. And so those are the types of questions I was asking him. And he graciously said, well, you know what? You know who I look up to so much on this issue? Jim Wallace. Now, I'd never heard of Jim Wallace, but I said, do you mean Detective J. Warner Wallace, one of my favorite authors and speakers? And he said, yeah, they're friends. He gets to call him Jim. So yeah, he said, why don't we do a webinar on this topic with Jim? And so we're so grateful that we're here doing that exact now. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and Alonzo will introduce the other. So Detective J. Warner Wallace is the author of a variety of books. We're going to be giving away some of them today. He's also an award-winning detective, a homicide detective. And he also has been featured on Dateline. He was featured in God's Not Dead 2. He's adjunct faculty at the Colson Center, as well as an adjunct professor at Biola University in Apologetics. He does a myriad of other things, as well as being a speaker around the world. His books have meant the world to me in my own wrestling with faith. He applies his best practices as a homicide detective, looking at forensic science and such, to the questions of the evidence we have for the death and resurrection of Jesus, and a whole myriad of other amazing questions. So he'll be our first speaker today. Actually, they're going to speak together, but I'm going to give away a book by him right now, which is one of the ones I've loved by him. The first book I read by him, Cold Case Christianity, again, where he's applying this these forensic expertise to the resurrection of Jesus. And the one who won this book is Ash Leatherwood. You have just won Cold Case Christianity by Detective Wallace. Alonzo, over to you.
Yeah, Dr. Sean McDowell is incredible. He is an associate professor at Biola University. He is a speaker, a writer. He creates incredible YouTube content. He's a dad and a husband. He's teaching even a Bible class at a high school. And is just one of those inspiring figures, and also a dear, dear friend of the Center for Public Speaking. And also, we have a book giveaway from Dr. Sean McDowell as well. As somebody that's been an apologist, public speaker since 2016, full-time, I'm telling you, this book has been incredible. Evidence that demands a verdict. and it has been well loved. And the giveaway winner of this book is Elena. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but you have just won that book. It is incredible, and I'm so excited that we get to give that to you.
I have that book right here as well. Alonzo and I both refer to it so often in our own preparation for our talks. So without further ado, please give a warm digital welcome to both our speakers, Detective Wallace, Dr. McDowell. Please join us on the screen. The first question I'll pose to Dr. McDowell. I don't want to turn this into a celebration of busyness and just perpetuate that people should be as busy as possible. So that's not what this question comes from. But to give us some context for what you're up against as you try to manage your time in a healthy way, can you tell us about the commitments you have in a regular week or month? What are some of the things as you think of time management that you're dealing with?
Sure. I'm a full-time professor at Biola University, Talbot School of Theology. I'm an author. Typically about a book a year. I edit, write, or co-write. Do a lot of work on social media, primarily Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and teach a high school class. And then I speak quite a bit. But my big priority is my wife and my kids. So trying to juggle all those things, I guess you could say, is one of my big challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'll ask the next question to Detective Wallace, exact same question. What are your responsibilities and commitments?
Well, lucky for me, I'm a little bit older than Sean. I'm really like the fact that we're doing this together. And I'm just flattered that Sean would even include me in this. Sean's probably almost young enough to be like my son. so there's a sense in which I feel rather paternal toward him. And we met early on. And as a matter of fact, Sean's the reason why I wrote my first book. He was the one who said, hey, we were training students in an immersive trip to Berkeley. And he said, you should write a book about that. And I thought, no, I was in the middle of my casework. I'm a cold case detective. And I had, I think, 3 trials that were set per jury. And I just had no margin to do anything like this. But my wife said, well, look, if Sean thinks you should write a book, maybe you should at least give it a go. So I did. So I now am retired from that position, but I still have 2 open cases. I get to volunteer on some of the bigger cases in Los Angeles County, just because I know I can help out with some of this stuff. So I get to volunteer. And by the way, I only volunteer. I do not want to be paid for that because I have to kind of manage these responsibilities. I'm only an adjunct at Biola. I get to teach a class a year usually. Same thing for SES, Southern Evangelical Seminary, and for Gateway Seminary of the Southern Baptist Convention here in Ontario. So I do 3 different seminary classes a year usually. And I get to write books too. As a matter of fact, I write about a book a year. We've been doing this for 8 years. We're now working on book number 9. So yeah, we get to do this fun stuff. And what's great about this is that we are in different generational places. My kids are grown and they're out of the house. That gives me a slightly different perspective on how I manage my time. And also, I think what happens is as you get older, I mean, you realize that like athletes, maybe our reflexes aren't quite as good as they were. Like a Tom Brady probably can't throw the ball quite as fast or quite as far as he used to, but now he has the wisdom to be able to read the defense and make changes that make up for those other aging aspects of his physicality. That's kind of what happens to us as speakers too. Like we kind of like figure out, okay, how do I manage this differently at this stage of life?
I want to go for it.
Sorry, I just want to jump in here. This is a burning question that I have as a public speaker, and I'm sure so many of us on here that are either pursuing that as a career or vocation or are currently doing this. How do you structure your week? Is it blocked and highly structured? Is it rigid? And maybe just on the back of that, how do you discern between opportunities, invitations, different tasks? And maybe Dr. McDowell, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I think having a rhythm and a structure is one of the most important things. I learned this doing my dissertation. Is I realized that if I let my emails drive my day, the day would end and I got emails done, but it really didn't create anything. So I would start blocking off periods in my day and I wouldn't allow anything to intervene into that block, whether it was 90 minutes here, 3 hours there. I would just carve out those times. Now, because I speak and because my kids have sporting events in the afternoon that I want to go to, like I'm not able to just completely do every week the same. I mean, our summers, our family's on the road a good amount of the time, but I'll always start off Monday morning and I'll look at my week and just think, okay, what commitments do I have? and where can I block out time that I won't let anything interrupt it, unless it's my family or an emergency, and then I can sit down and be productive. And for me, the morning time, I'm a morning guy. I'm up early with energy, and my energy fades as I get into the evening. So I try to structure out some time. So for me, when this is done, I've already thought through, I have class about 3 hours after this. So I left that time open. I'm going to go study and read and prep, partly for class and an upcoming interview that I have. So every week is not the same, but I also, in the morning, I like to get up early. I make breakfast. I have a podcast I listen to on the scripture. And then I like the daily briefing from Moeller to have a little scripture, a little news while I'm making breakfast. It just starts the day for me. So it's a matter of looking at my week, blocking things out, and resisting the temptation. And sometimes I give into it to respond to something on Twitter, to do something that feels urgent. But as a whole, when I'm able to prioritize what matters for the week, I'm able to put those secondary things later and not let them creep into my schedule.
Just before we ask the same question as Detective Wallace, Sean, you mentioned to me when we were chatting by phone that you have kind of a personal mission statement that helps you discern what to say yes and no to. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is something that Jim really taught me. He'll use the language, and I'm sure you can unpack this, Jim, which is stay in your lane. And it got me to think about, what is my lane? What's my contribution? And the older I get, the more clarity I have on that. So that lane is, I'm in the lane of apologetics. I am a generalist, and I really want to approach apologetics graciously and relationally with people. There's a place for debate. There's a place for a prophetic voice. That's not primarily me. That's the way God has equipped me. That's what motivates me. And with that said, in particular, I also have a heart for the next generation. So apologetics, worldview, and students is my funnel. So if I get invited to a big event and I'm like, wow, that's a really cool opportunity, but they want me to speak on something outside of my lane, I'm almost never going to do it, as tempting as it is, because when I show up to speak, I'll be thinking, why am I here? What am I doing? So I just found having that clarity helps me think through on all levels. Who do I want to interview on YouTube? Who do I want to interview on my podcast? What classes do I want to teach? What speaking events do I want to take? How do I spend my time? So thinking through relational apologetics with a focus on the next generation, that's my heart and my lane. And it just helps me filter out, for the most part, secondary things that aren't worth my energy and time that, frankly, I probably shouldn't be speaking into.
Sure. And Detective Wallace, can you answer the same question in terms of how the rhythm of your week, how you organize, and what you say yes and no to?
Okay, so I'm in a little different position than Sean's. I want to just launch an idea out to you. I think all of life is about this tenuous balance between time and reward. And sometimes the reward is financial. I was not always a speaker. I was working as a detective for 25 years. So that was really about, hey, I didn't just support my family. And that was of a high priority. I needed the reward of income. So I had a lot of time. So I was willing to exchange time for the thing that I thought was more valuable, I didn't have, which was income. Sometimes we can say in this stage of life, maybe it's ministry. What kind of impact? That's also a reward. But as you get older, what you see is that the entire thing shifts. Now time has more value to me than income. I'm in a little different position. So I represent those people who want to speak and want to be heard on a number of issues, but they already have an income. I have a pension. I am not a full-time speaker. I'm a retired detective, and then that pays all the bills. So now I make choices based not on what the reward is in terms of income. It's about impact. But even then, time is important to me. And what I discovered is what you say you value is just talk until you show me how your time is being spent. So I can say, for example, that I love my wife, but when I look down at my calendar, I realize that, I'm only spending like an hour a day if I'm lucky, because I've got such a tight calendar. Well, then the income's already taken care of. So for me, I'm showing you what I really love. So I prioritize first things first, right? I mean, we're not called to love our ministry and our speaking schedule and our opportunities as Christ loves the church. We're called to love our wives that way. So I try to say, okay, that's the first priority. In the end, you are probably not going to use the word regret with any speaking opportunities. Regret is a word we reserve for our marriages, for our families. Those are the places where we feel true regret. So I structure my week and my life such that I'm not going to have a regret. Let's put it this way, folks. I don't want at the end of it, someone to say to Susie, hey, what was it like being married to Jim? And she's going to go, it was okay. No, no, I want her to say it was fabulous. That's the first domino that has to fall. This is why I think, we are as speakers, really leaders. Sometimes people bring us into a conference or to a church because their leader thinks that we're going to bring something he or she can't bring. So we're leading. And what is one of the first criteria that Paul has for leaders? It comes down to your marriage. And so I think we have to be focused there first. Now I'm in a different season. I teach this class at Biola. It's called Applied Apologetics. We're just teaching people how to become speakers, take that master's degree and turn it into a speaking career or a writing career, whatever it is you dreamed of. And I only asked them to read 2 books. And one of the books is Halftime by Bob Buford. It's just a way that Bob had a ministry called Halftime Ministries, and where he was trying to help people turn that corner in their 50s from, from money to ministry, from to purpose. How do I get out of this obligation so I can spend more time doing what God has called me to do? And that's what that happened for me. I was retired at 52. So I was able to say, okay, now that I get to do what I want to do. So structuring my week is really different than Sean's, right? Nothing happens before I with Susie. So I won't do anything till 1 o'clock. Every day till 1 o'clock is time I spend with my wife. Now, what that means is I'm not going to have opportunities that are going to be maybe driven by the time necessary to build the kind of YouTube channel I want, or to build the kind of platform I want. But that's okay, because we're still busy enough. Trust me, we're making an impact. The only question is, what's the priority in that structure? So for me, nothing starts until 1 o'clock, and we're busy. I'm writing books every, we're speaking kind of like Sean's schedule. It's very similar, but I try to take Susie everywhere I go. But we're in a different stage where I can take Susie because she doesn't have any other obligations.
Can I ask maybe an awkward question? But it is, I think, 11:17 on the West Coast, which I think is that where you live, or?
Yes, we're both on the West.
So then
It's so funny.
I feel like we're violating your 1 p.m. principle.
Yeah. Okay. So you're violated it. So
Okay.
So here's what I do. Every opportunity I get, I send it to Susie, including podcasts.
Okay.
Because I know that's any speaking engagement, I don't respond to the vendor or to the booking agency. I send it to Susie.
Okay.
What do you think? Are you willing to, if you're not willing to go, is this something you care if I do this? So that's why I've got 3 podcasts in a row with you guys today, because this is the one day I was willing to, take away from Susie this week.
Okay. Well,
so
please,
yes, but I send everything through the filter of my marriage.
well, thank you. Please thank Susie for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alonzo, you can go for the next question, Alonzo.
Yeah, I have a question. This is something I wrestle with. I know lots of people wrestle with this. Procrastination. I have something coming up. I have a big talk coming up. I'm not using my time effectively. How do you all manage procrastination? Has that been a struggle? Maybe Dr. McDowell, you want to start us off?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes and no, to be completely honest with you. I don't know where it comes from, but when I accept tasks, there's just an energy and motivation. I've got to get this done. So I've always been like with schooling, I would push through, I would go finals week. And honestly, I was like, okay, everyone else is stressing. I've been ahead of the game. So I'd be lying if I said I didn't have this drive. Now, with that said, there are certain tasks I know I have to do. And when I put them on the calendar, it forces into me, all right, I've committed to this, I cleared time. I just have to get it done because I've made a commitment. So I'm working on a certain curriculum right now, and I just keep pushing it off. I work on something else, but I'm filming. And so I know the week before it has to be done. So I actually physically put on my calendar, plan time before, and don't let anything encroach into that, and then just get it done. So that tends to work for me, especially if I've made a commitment to somebody, my pride and my honor, those things are on the line. And so if I keep pushing stuff off, put it on the calendar, and that'll force you to get to it. And then I just am like, I'm not going to feel guilty because I have it on the schedule. This day is blocked off. Between now and then, I'm not going to let it rob my joy of other things that I'm doing in the meantime.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Detective Wallace, what do you think? Procrastination.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, when I was, before I became a detective, I was an architect. And when you were working in the arts, you often will have a client who gives you something and you have a quite quick turnaround. And so we would start, we call it a charrette, where we would just be up all night long, banging out the first ideas. You know, that ideation period in any design process where you're just dumping every idea you can. And that it just needs time to do that. And we don't wait to the last minute, because you cannot be creative under pressure really as well as you can in the very beginning. So I always say, look, I do cram, I do charrette, I do procrastinate. It's in reverse. I do it early. So I'm always the guy they said, oh, you're already done. Oh, you've been done for weeks, because I don't want, I know I can be more, because what happens is I create something and then I'm thinking about it. I'm looking at it. I've already drawn it. I've already modeled it. But now I'm thinking, oh, I want to tweak this because I've had time to think about it because I did it early. And so the design always ended up better at the end of a 5-week project if I really had it pretty much set by the third week. And then I had 2 weeks to kind of think about it. Same is true for books for me. I was like, I'm gonna bang it out fast, and then I'm gonna look at it and I'm gonna change it 1,000 times, because that's just my process anyway. But I think part of it too is this: look, a lot of us who are here have a staff or some other people who are somehow engaged in the project. They're helping in some way. They're editing video. So my always question is, what if you don't have any of that? Because I don't have any employees. I don't have a 501c3. I don't have a ministry. I don't have any help. I don't have anyone I can turn to even help me. If I've got to book a flight, I got to book the flight. If I got to, it's all of these things we're doing ourselves. So a lot of it is this the kind of thing you are passionate enough about to be excited and have energy? It's an energy issue for me. And I think that sometimes procrastination is an example of confidence. And I've known people who procrastinate because they're not confident they can do it well. So they put it off because they're not quite confident they can. So I try to limit myself to only those kinds of projects that I feel really confident that I can do well. That's why I talk about staying in a lane. You know, you discover your lane just about how has God shaped you? What kind of life experience has God given you? And then I stay in that. So give me an example of this. Like I always talk about this in our class, that, you know, if you or somebody wants to preach the gospel, there's a lot of people who want to preach the gospel. Good for you, do it. But if you are unique and you have a unique lane, you can do. So if I'm an award-winning surfer, well, now you got a unique, oh, that's different. You're going to separate from the crowd that way. Oh, if I'm a female award-winning surfer, oh, now you're even lesser of those. So now you really, oh, if I'm a female award-winning surfer whose arm has been bitten off by a shark, oh, you've got a ministry. And if you look at what Bethany Hamilton speaks on, she stays in her lane. She speaks on hardship and body image and all kinds of things that you would think would be appropriate for somebody who's had to struggle through what she has struggled through. So it's about really sometimes us asking the question, you know, what is unique about our life experiences or about our identity that then we can leverage for the gospel, right? And a lot of that for me too now as I get older is my marriage. Like I love marriage. I love marriage more. I mean, if I wasn't a Christian, there would be the highest value I would hold would be for marriage. Well, that's something that we can speak about because that's something that's in your lane, even though I'm not a marriage counselor, right? So I would ask all those who are listening, your lane is developed primarily by just asking, what has God done with your life that you can now leverage for the gospel?
Amazing. Detective Wallace, you mentioned the question of energy and how that impacts our time. What is your relationship to, or how do you approach questions of nutrition, of physical health, sleep, gym, any of those things? Can you speak to that?
Well, okay. So for us, because we're in this particular period of time, is that now it's a balance issue. It's truly a balance issue. And I think that if you look at all the statistics related to longevity, related to reduced Alzheimer's, related to whatever it may be, you will see that one of the highest markers in all those categories is exercise. It really is. It marks higher than any kind of supplement you can take. Really, staying active is huge. So I got lucky. I married somebody who was a sprinter in high school. And so running has always been a part of our life. So we ran this morning. So we run every morning before we do anything else. That's one of the reasons why I carve out from 1 o'clock. Right. And then we're going to ride bikes. We're going to do something, but we're going to spend hours together. And it's also really good for your head. So that's one thing that we do, is we make sure that exercise is a regular part of our life, and we make it part of our marriage. Because if it's just part of your life, but it's not something you can do together, it's good. But I want this to, one of the ways I manage time is to put those two things I want to do, spend time with my wife and exercise. If you put them together, well, now you've just carved some time, right? Because you're doing those same things simultaneously.
Mhm.
So for me, a lot of it is doing that with her. Now, as far as food goes, I have one son is a doctor, and he was a biochemist before he was a doctor, and he started intermittent fasting because now he's an anesthesiologist. He's in the operating room until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So he just knew he couldn't eat in there. So he developed this love of intermittent fasting. And the more you read about it, I think the more I see that, yeah, it's actually been good for us. And it's number one, it's a caloric intake kind of an issue because your eat window is about 6 hours, and you're going to from 2 to 8, you're going to eat, but you're not eating between 2 and 8. So that actually has been helpful for us. Also, if you're traveling from the West Coast to a speaking event, you lose the 3 hours. So you're on East Coast time, but now it's 4 in the afternoon there. Well, I don't have to eat until I get there because I've already fasted through the flight. So that's the kind of stuff that I think has been helpful from a nutrition and exercise perspective. And we, look, we, when you're in law enforcement, you probably are going to be staying pretty close to your optimal, whatever your optimal body shape, or you should be anyway, because in the end, you'll all have to get in uniform at some point and be deployed again.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. McDowell, what about you? I'm always seeing you playing basketball on Instagram and all of these things. What about you?
My wife and I both played college basketball. So like Jim, we love to run, we love to work out. In fact, Saturday, I'd carved out, my kids were at events, all 3 of them. And I had 3 hours to finish up taxes. And it was a beautiful day in SoCal. And one of the things is I plan my life out. And what causes stress sometimes is when the plan doesn't go the way I want it to go. And my wife's just like, hey, let's go on a run. It's a beautiful morning. We're like 10 minutes from the beach. And I was like, this is invading my plan. I had this moment. I told her, I was like, I've got to get this tax stuff done. Took a deep breath, came back to her, was like, you know what? I'll get that stuff done. Let's go on a run. And we did. And of course, I got it done. So I can't say I always respond perfectly, but I try to keep the big picture of like time with my wife, like Jim said, when it's all said and done, far more important than taxes. Now, I could tell you this. I've always enjoyed working out. When people say, how do you get to the point of enjoying it? I don't know how to tell you to get to a point of enjoying it. I just like to do it and to push myself. I enjoy lifting. I enjoy running. I enjoy biking. I've just wired that way. But about 8 months ago, based on a bet with a young kid from the city who was living with us, who's a football player, I was like, I'm 45. I could get in better shape than you could. Trying to like talk trash to get him to get into better shape. I was like, I can't do this myself. So I actually got a nutritionist to help me. And I'm telling you, 90% is diet versus exercise. 90%. The amount you put in your body, the type you put in your body, when you put stuff in your body. I lost about 15 pounds and am just leaner and feel better than ever. And it was getting a nutritionist who helped me lay out my diet. Now, I probably fast once or twice a month for 32 hours. I don't do intermittent fasts, but I'll do a full day fast a night, a full day and the next day. And I kind of hate it, but it's good for your digestive system. It's good for burning off fat. It's had spiritual benefit. I have learned in so many ways, like, wow, I really comforted myself by eating in ways I didn't realize. And this spiritual benefit has purged me of some of those habits in my own life. So I now have more energy. And I'm just telling you, diet is huge if you want to be a speaker. And especially when your sleep is being changed. Like Jim said, you travel to the East Coast. It's like, okay, I speak at 8. That's 5. I'm up at 3:30. That's exhausting. Diet pays off hugely. At least it has in my life.
Well, hey, thanks so much. I want to remind everyone, I see people submitting questions in the chat box, and we're going to miss them likely. Please copy and paste your questions from the chat box into the Q&A box. There are 2 different boxes. We want to receive your questions, which we will really soon. But before we take a break, Dr. McDowell, you talked with such awe and love about Detective Wallace's approach to this stuff. And so as much as Alonzo and I are asking questions, can you comment on what you so respect about his approach to time management? And if you have a question you want to prompt him with, a question we might not even think of, the floor is yours.
Oh gosh, I would just say, Jim, you said you look at me paternally. He's one of the people in my life who, if Jim says something, I will stop and listen. And I appreciate that he's had the willingness to just speak truth, even when I haven't asked him. And I mean that dead serious, out of love, totally out of love, that you would have the willingness to do that, Jim. And I think because you're, I don't know, maybe 15 years down the road from me, you see things in a way at this stage that I would not have naturally seen. So I don't know that there's anybody else next to my father who's spoken into me that willingly and graciously and boldly. So I don't know if this would be anything different than what you said, but I would ask you this, Jim, if you put yourself back into that moment, when you were shifting into speaking, how would you encourage yourself back then in light of what you know now, 10 to 15 years into this?
Yeah, I think what I would say is this. So much of what we do is, first of all, I love Sean because he's allowed me to say things that I probably should never have said to him, and has graciously received that. But a lot of it was I realized at the end of a career, the mistakes you make at the beginning of a career, even if it's a speaking career, because I do have regrets. I have regrets about my own. Look, the problem with homicides is that you can't control them. Like I can't. There was no calendar to schedule. The people kill each other at the worst possible times, always on holidays. You're gone all the time because that schedule is controlling me. I couldn't schedule it. So I was gone constantly. And I just knew that that was something that you have regrets about how you had to live for those number of years. So that was, I'd love how Sean's been gracious to even allow me to speak to him at all. The thing I would say looking back at it though, is this: I came out of a profession that cost us something. And I jumped into another profession as if I was a full-time apologist.
Hmm.
And I'm not. So in other words, this is the one time when most retirees say, what can we do together that we don't get paid for, that we could actually bless people with, because we have this point, we're at this point in our lives where we can actually volunteer in places. And instead, what I did, I took that momentum and that everydayism of law enforcement, of working in as a detective, and I just exchanged it into another. I wish I'd have had, but part of it, I'll be honest, folks, all of us here who are speakers, we have to fight the temptation and the challenge of celebrity. Our identity becomes who we are on the stage. Look, don't tell me that we're not watching how many followers we have on our YouTube channel. Don't tell me we're not doing that, because we are. As a matter of fact, here's my thought experiment, and I'll be honest with you. Most of us, if they didn't publish how many subscribers we have on YouTube, or how many views we're getting, or how many likes we're getting. In other words, those metrics were just not available, and no social media platform could ever tell you if one person watched the video or if 1 million watched the video. I think most of us doing this work on YouTube would stop, because what's driving us is our search for identity and value from our public platform. And I kind of caught this early in the social media curve. But what I see now of all of us who want to be, it's if we exchange, like we'll say always, I want to grow this so I can reach more people with this message. And at some point it turns into, I want to reach people with a message so I can grow this. And that's where we have to be careful, right? So looking back at it, I know that was me. Oh my gosh, anyone can write a book, folks. That's not the hard part. It's getting someone to read your book. That's the hard part. And that's on the building of all of this cultural social media marketing. I don't even call it social media anymore. It's social marketing. And where all of us are marketing something. We're marketing either our personal lives or who we are as a parent, because we post about our kids all the time, or we're marketing what we're speaking, or we're marketing the next book we're trying to sell. And that's the thing I would say to all of us. Look, let's make sure that we pull this back. Ask yourself this question: if nobody was paying attention, would you still do it? So for me, I speak as a spiritual discipline. The same way I read scripture, I see it as an act of service. Now, we get paid to speak, but I'll be honest, if I'm doing it locally, or I can bring Susie, I'm not going to charge anything, because then we're volunteering as a group. It doesn't take any time away. I charge based on how much time you're asking me to be away from my wife. What is one day with my wife worth? And that price goes up every day because we're getting older. So that's really how I look at it now. If I could have I didn't know this early on in these last 10 years of doing this. If I had known that then, I'd probably be like now. I don't do anything without running it by her first. We're doing this together, or we're not doing it at all. And I mean, not just her support. I mean, we're doing this together, physically together, or we're not doing it at all.
Thank you, Detective Wallace. We want to be hosting a webinar on celebrity culture precisely because the challenge we have as we're coaching people to be more excellent and effective and engaging speakers is it often helps feed into helping people become more successful, more famous, more celebrities. And it's one of the questions actually asked by a friend of Sean and mine, Carson Whitenauer. He's asked me that question, and he was my first client ever in public speaking coaching. And we're having some great progress. And he said, Daniel, are you just trying to turn me into a celebrity? And it was actually quite a scary question. And so we want to do a webinar to have some wrestling through this question. So as I was Googling what the next webinar might be and looking into celebrity culture, I came across Detective Wallace, your article that came out really recently on this. And so I was reading it the other day. It wasn't a matter of work anymore, but like a personal reflection and devotion to read this and bring my own heart to the Lord and say, like, God, like, would you please help me, rescue me from that a desire for self-promotion and all of this. And that's going to continue to be a journey. It's so tough. So thanks for addressing that. We're going to give away the book that Detective Wallace mentioned. That's called Halftime. And the winner is Nicole Schagel. You just won that book. So we're going to, everyone stay with us except the speakers. You can take a break for a moment. We're going to give away another book, have a little invitation for everyone. And then we're going to post your questions to the speakers. So Alonzo, feel free as well to just take a break, and then I'll invite you guys back in a second. Like I said, this is an invitation. So you're already familiar, if you're here, with the webinars we do that are about once a month on different elements of public speaking and leadership and life. They are excellent, but something I'm even more passionate about as a vehicle for growth is the group courses we do. The group courses, unlike webinars, the webinars, you're mostly just seeing the speaker speak and getting to text in a question. With the courses, it's actually live Zoom. It's not a webinar, it's live immersive Zoom. So you're getting to be face-to-face with the coaches, with the speakers, and we're having you do exercises. So you're not listening to us, you're actively participating in the art of storytelling and vocal dynamics and how to speak without notes, a variety of these topics. We're about to launch our next course, and we're going to have some of my favorite speakers on the call as your coaches. So that includes apologist, professor, detective, Dr. Mike Lacona is going to be speaking on coaching you. We're going to have International Justice Missions Josh Thomas in his line of work. Storytelling is a huge part of helping fight injustice. And so he's going to do the evening on storytelling. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Callum Miller, who's a medical doctor and a beloved speaker who's gone viral recently for the gracious way that he tackles difficult topics. One of the things I'm most looking forward to about this course comes from the present course that we're doing, where we've listened to the questions that our women clients are asking and realizing, honestly, for me, some of these questions are a shock, because as a male speaker, I haven't wrestled through some of the realities that women speakers do. And so our team has been speaking into these questions that women clients are asking as public speakers. But we're going to have a specific night in our next course with Dr. Jo Vitelli, and she's going to be addressing elements of public speaking specifically for women. But this is not a women's only event. I think it's so important that the male speakers on the call, which includes pastors and apologists, as well as aspiring speakers and students, that we are able to hear and really hear what are some of the tough realities and unique questions that women speakers face. Everything from elements of vocal dynamics and Q&A and all sorts of stuff that, as we listen and are present for this coaching evening on women speakers, I think it will help us be able to create the public speaking world, or help the world of public speaking to be a more wholesome and better place. So in light of that evening, we're gonna give away this book. It's called Outspoken: Why Women's Voices Get Silenced and How to Set Them Free. It's such a good book. And the winner of this book is Katyn Rosario. You have won this book. Now we're gonna post, Maddie, if she hasn't already, is going to post the link to that evening, or rather that course. It's a 9-week course. She's going to post it in the chat for you. Now, it's important for you to take a look at that link, because the cost of the course is 450 Canadian, but we have an early bird price of 390. That lasts till Thursday. We wanted all of you to have a special price. So if you click on that link, you're going to see more information, bios of all the different coaches. We'd love for you to check that out. And if you register before Thursday, it's cheaper for you. And good news for you Americans and those of you in England or Europe who use the pound with euro, it's even cheaper for you because it's 390 Canadian. So for the States, I think that's 310 US dollars. And for England, I think it's even cheaper. Anyways, enough of that. I want to welcome our speakers back up, and we're going to be posting the questions that you're asking. So Alonzo, why don't you ask the speakers the first question from the audience?
Yeah, so this is a great question, everyone. So thank you so much for submitting it. How do you use your time when you're trying to read books and prepare a lesson, presentation, or book, especially for a new or newer topic?
I guess I'll jump in here. I agree to new topics of things like Jim said that I have energy for. So I'm not going to agree to write on a topic that I'm not passionate about that. Now, it might be filling in for my church when they ask me to preach once or twice a year on whatever passage they give me. I'm passionate about that because I want to serve my local church. And I like being challenged to preach out of the scriptures that might not normally be something I would turn to. So the first step is I just agree to do something that I'm passionate about. What I do then, like for example, a recent talk I gave was on cancel culture and deconstruction, is I find the best other books that have been written on it, if any. I find some of the best talks that are written on this, and I try to just see what are people saying about this and get a sense of where the conversation is. That's kind of where I start. Actually, even before I do that, I write down all my own thoughts first, so I'm not clouded by somebody else's interpretation of it. So deconstruction, cancel culture, I thought if I was going to write a talk on this, I just brain dump everything, scripture, examples, stories. I get it down. And then I just start reading what other people are saying. What do I agree with? What do I disagree with? And I just start to organize it a little bit, get some thoughts. And then I'll go and I'll say, okay, if I'm going to organize this talk, what will it look like? And a typical apologetic talk is grab somebody's attention, define your terms, show why this is important, and then, maybe lay out 3 points, respond to objections, and then give a closing. Like I organize a ton of talks through that structure. So evolution, grab people's attention, define the terms, maybe walk through 4 or 5, objections people give that I'm not persuaded by, respond to objections, and then conclusion. That's a structure I often speak by on apologetic topics. So brain dump, do a lot of research, organize the talk, and then I'll probably build a PowerPoint at the end. Now, I know Jim approaches that differently because he's got some serious artistic background, but that's often how I approach a new talk.
Yeah, mine's a little more restrictive. And what I love about Sean's approach is it allows him to step in. Now, I've been asked to do this too, but it's a little bit different when you're writing books first, right? So you have this content, you're staying in your lane, you write 8 books, and now you've got talks from each one of those books. Now, here's how I typically do it. I don't write with words. I write with images. What I mean is I think about it in terms of how it's going to be done visually, because that's my background. My bachelor's degree was in design. And then I have the master's degree in architecture. I just think of it visually. It helps also with your juries. And I think it's also effective for young people, right? You can do some pretty deep stuff if you're willing to make it visual. But like, for example, when Zondervan assigned me for the last book, I said, okay, I'll do it, but I need 2 years to build the stage presentations and give them and modify them. And from those visual presentations, I will write a book. And they gave me 2 years. So, I mean, it's overlapping other stuff we're doing, but the point is, I knew that I had to create the visual content first. I'm thinking about it in terms of this is like Jesus talking about parables. He knows he could just talk about the importance of faith, but when he talks about it in terms of a mustard seed and that kind of branches that birds sit on, well, but he's using a visual analogy. I'm trying to think what's the visual analogy first that will then become a book. And that provides me with an opportunity to create talks. So like Sean, probably, I just wrote a book called Person of Interest. I think there's probably like maybe combinations, 10 to 20 talks I can give from that book. They're all entirely visual. But if you asked me, hey, can you come and speak on deconstruction, for example, I would say no. Now, I know that sounds terrible, but it's not in my lane right now. The things that are in my lane are the things that I have written about. And so those are the things I'm going to be doing. So that's why I would say to you that the real challenge is going to be, what are you the kind of person who's written books or have got a lane that's so strong that you're prepared? When I was in seminary, they had a preaching class. I took 2 preaching classes, but when I was in seminary, they also had a teaching class, like a speaking class. And I thought, well, there's a big difference between what pastors do on a weekly basis and what speakers get to do. We get to refine X number of talks and give them over and over and over again until they should be pretty good. And that's what we do that's different than trying to come up from zero every week. And when Sean says yes to a pulpit appearance, that's kind of what he has to do. He has to. Now, it'll take me to do 1 talk, might take me 3 weeks of visual PowerPoint, Photoshop, imagining this, creating this thing I'm going to narrate. And then the first time I give it's probably going to be a train wreck because I don't know how to give it yet. And so that's why I typically will say, if it's not something that's in my lane or in my expertise, I will just say, I'm so sorry. That's just not one I can give.
What I love about both of the responses is like a fresh perspective on approaching this, as well as just feeling a bit of freedom to either say, no, I'm going to do something that I'm more geared towards or passionate about or confident about. And at the same time, yeah, just feeling that liberty as well to like, this is probably going to suck the first time. This is probably not going to be the best, but that's just part of being a speaker. So that's really great and practical tips, both of you. Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, here's the next question. Someone asked, I often think I could do so much more if I had staff to help with handling scheduling, content production, YouTube, podcasts. Do you have any staff to help you with your content creation and scheduling? Pretend that you didn't. What would you change in your advice? Dr. Sean McDowell, do you want to address this?
I'd be happy to. I'm trying to get more staff right now in different ways. So this is an ongoing, as your platform grows, you want and need more staff if that's what you want to do. So that question never ends. But I'll tell you, one of the quickest, earliest things I learned is to delegate. And I was speaking at, Jim, you've spoken there for the youth events, at the Saddleback youth event, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And I don't even remember what they asked me to speak on. And I threw together a PowerPoint that I thought was pretty cool. And I showed up and they tweaked the PowerPoint and made it look really sharp. So I went to the director. I said, hey, who did this? He's like, yeah, I was a student. I said, I'll give you $50 for each of my talks that you make look sharper and add PowerPoints. And I've been hiring him for the last 10 or 12 years because I don't have the ability like Jim to build these cool PowerPoints, and I don't actually always use it. But I thought, here's a way to delegate my time, my ability. $50 is worth it. Now I pay him a little more than $50, but as a student, it was worth his time. So I'm consistently trying to delegate. Now, it's easier when you have a staff, and obviously we have different amount of time, we have different resources, we have different abilities. But all the time I'm asking myself, do I need to spend my time doing this? Or can I get somebody else to do this for me? And if so, who? That's the biggest trade-off, is delegate.
That's a good point. By the way, he's only paying that guy $62.50 now. I don't want to lie to you.
It's US dollars, so in Canada seems like a ton.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's now worth $12.50 more than he was before. What a guy. Anyway, but I think part of it, you're right. Like, you have to figure out, how do you get creative about involving staff? Because I was in a paramilitary organization for years, law enforcement. And the one thing I wanted to not do ever again is work for anybody. Okay. I didn't want anyone to control my schedule other than me, but I also don't want employees, because then I'm caught up trying to help them with their, so true freedom is to have neither one of these two ends to look at. Okay. So for me, I had to figure out, how do I get creative in bringing someone in? So what I'll do, for example, there's a speaker bureau that Sean and I have both used. And Sean, I actually book almost everything through them. Here's why. The point of contact, they're not finding me speaking engagements. The speaking engagements are coming through my website, but I have them go to him. Now, that means when he gets that request, here's what's great about it, is he's going to get a percentage of all my speaking events. But I don't have staff. I don't want to pay staff. I'd rather have it just come. I don't care what I get. So whatever he takes is fine, because at least then I've got somebody who is making the first contact and handling a lot of the stuff that I wouldn't have to handle. But also, I realize that we have to be comfortable in asking the question, how big does each one of you want to be? How big, where do you want this to go? So there's a point at which I was able to say, no, this is enough. Do I really want any more speaking engagements than I have now? No, not really. Because I want to be more concise and more deliberate about the engagements I have. But I think so how big do you want this to be? It turns out you can probably get as big as you need to be without a staff of much, right? You probably could, because it's just, I've never had a staff. So how do you partner with speaking bureaus that'll take a percentage, but they'll actually help you do some of that. And then when it comes to social media, I have to be content that this is the rate at which we're going to grow our social media platform. And it has been sufficient to keep us like super busy, right? Now, one last thing I'll say, all of us know that if we could be financially independent, we can make different choices. I remember going to the Billy Graham Museum in North Carolina a couple of years ago, and he was being interviewed by Greta Van Susteren, and he was in his 70s. She said, what's the one thing you would do differently looking backward? I would do less speaking events.
Mm.
I thought, whoa. Remember, every time Billy's doing a speaking event, he's bringing thousands to the gospel. He'd do less. And so again, at the end, here's what I would say. It turns out that financial independence is not the ability to buy anything. It's the ability to buy anything you want. And I don't want anything. So I already have financial independence. So that has allowed me then to look at my speaking calendar and say, wow, you know what? I can do a lot of things because now I can do less things. I can be more intentional about what I do want to do. I'm not like struggling to kind of muster up 10 events a month or 4 events a month or whatever it is you feel like you're struggling to do right now. So a lot of it for me has been, hey, what make the main things, make our prioritize our families and our marriages first. And then you probably can do all you need to do, even if you had no staff. Now, can you become a full-on RZIM ministry? Probably not. Okay, I get that. But probably as a speaker right now, you could make huge impact just on your own efforts.
That's such a refreshing and challenging perspective, Detective Wallace. Thank you so much for that wisdom. I can't wait to go back and rewatch this and just like take copious notes and change my entire life. Been really great. So thank you for that. Okay, I have the next question from the audience, and it's this. Who were the most influential people in each of your lives in terms of character formation? And if you want to tag in there also maybe somebody that really inspired you in terms of a public speaker, that'd be great as well.
I'll let you go first, Sean. I think I know
Well,
who you're gonna say, which is why I'm letting you go first.
I know you expect me to say you, Jim, but no, I'm kidding.
No.
You don't. That's so not true. You know exactly who I'm going to say. It's a no-brainer with my father. His example, his character, his consistency, his love for our family, especially given his broken background of really severe sexual abuse, drunken father. My dad's my hero. That's an easy one. He's the same on stage as off stage. So by the words he spoke and the example that he's lived, the times he's challenged me and disciplined me growing up, that one's easy. Another one was a mentor that I had in college. I went through a pretty significant doubting period, just wondering, is this really true? What do I want to do with my life? And I had a mentor who really encouraged me to read Henry Nouwen's writings, just a Catholic writer, who talked a lot about not finding your identity in what you do, what people say about you, what you have, but resting in your relationship with the Father. And this was pretty transformative to me. And he just gave me space to be myself. He asked me questions. He processed and cared for me through this and just had a huge impact on me that I can't overstate.
Yeah, for me, it was my grandfather, who was the Warner in J. Warner Wallace. This is a guy who I always wanted to be. And he was nothing like us. I mean, he wasn't a detective. My dad was, but my grandfather was not. He's just a guy who worked like crazy, loved his wife all the way to the very end, had a marriage I could model. It was always the kind of person you wanted to be around. He was an affirmer. At the same time, he was the sweetest, kindest person I ever met. And he was simple. He didn't seek out any of the stuff that ends up corrupting, right? There's only 3 reasons why one does a murder. I always say it's the same things that can corrupt us as speakers. And that is financial gain, sexual or relational desire, and the pursuit of power. That third one, by the way, is probably 70% of all temptation. So my grandfather didn't seek any of those things. He just, had a strong work ethic. And so he has been the person who I have often thought, when it's all said and done. As a matter of fact, my son David just got recently married. He is a David Warner Wallace. Well, he doesn't barely even know my grandfather. But first thing his wife said to me is, hey, don't let anyone else in the family name somebody Warner. We got that name. So it turns out the power of Warner has transcended several generations now. So that's been the biggest thing. Now, of course, there are speakers in our profession that you just end up being close to because you spend a lot of time together. I feel close to Sean. I don't see him enough. I feel close to Greg Kokel. I see him a lot because we do a lot of work together. And I was part of Stand to Reason for a number of years. And so these are folks who I have a deep, they know me well enough to say, hey, what about this? What about that? They know my family's backstory. They know my kids' backstory. They know all the things they can, and I know theirs. And so it's helpful. I would say to anyone watching this right now, you can't do life alone, right? We know that already, but it seems like sometimes we don't often know. And when we know a speaker, we're kind of trying to get like professional wisdom from that person. Like, what can I do to be, if you like the guy or gal and you want to be like him or her, then you're like kind of saying, what can I do to be like you? we're not looking at it as two brothers or sisters who are walking in Christ, who are in this weird, unusual position in a world that is infatuated with celebrity, trying to resist the temptations of celebrity, trying to resist all of the things that drive us. And that's what we need to look for. Look for somebody like that in this field, and then and walk through it together, rather than, feel like, hey, well, how can he help me? How can he help my career? And that's what we sometimes find ourselves doing.
Well, Detective Wallace, I know you're gonna have to go really soon because you have an event right after this. So here's the last question. You can go first, and then honestly, we are so grateful for your time, but you can just finish your answer and then just leave, and just know that we're so grateful for you.
See, look at the expression on Sean's face. Sean knows that if I leave before he does, he'll say, "Yeah, well, it's good to be Jim Wallace, but you're not quite as committed as I am because I stayed."
Okay, here's a final question for you both, Detective Wallace. You go first. So yeah, you have really helpfully shared advice about how you prepare for your talks. You have talked about some heart matters and prioritizing one's family. The last question as we look at time management isn't about the public speaking side of speaking, but the loneliness side. It's so easy to become so lonely when one's traveling, speaking, and all of this. And so can you give us one final tip on cultivating friendship as busy people?
Well, I think that's really a struggle that I have still. I seriously hate to travel because it's lonely. That's really the biggest issue. Is I love doing events, for example, where Sean and I will get to be together at the Cross-Examined Instructors Academy, or places where when I get there, all of our friends are there and we're doing a conference together. That's not quite so lonely. But most of the time, yeah, you are going to feel lonely in that process. And so then the question becomes, what can you do to solve that? Well, look, I think it's like you're investing in something that you're then making withdrawals from. And part of the problem is that we have so focused on our speaking careers, if we aren't careful, that we're not spending the time with our families and with our spouses. Let's just be honest, folks. I'm circling back to the same issue, because where your time is, that's where your heart is. And you can say you love something, but really you spend an hour a day doing it. I mean, some of us are spending more time exercising than we are with the very thing that ends loneliness, which is a connection with other people in your own family. I mean, I've seen this. I've seen a number of marriages that could be a lot better if we weren't involved doing this work. So here's what I would say. All of us have to kind of reconfigure our lives to be relationship centric in our own relationships. Then, what's great about, I don't like leaving. I've got to leave on Wednesday. I'm not back till Sunday. I don't like doing that. But I have something that I can't wait to get back to. And when I'm gone and there's something I can't wait to get back to, I see that as a celebration point in my week. Sunday is going to be awesome because I'll be coming home. And, I know how Susie will treat that day like a celebration day. So I think part of it is, are we investing enough in the relationships we do have so we can make good withdrawals?
Thank you so much.
Okay,
hey,
now I'm
going
to let
you leave. Thank you.
I'm going to let Sean make fun of me and get the last word. Love you, brother. Good to see all of you.
Love
Thank
you,
for
Jim.
having me. I appreciate it. Okay, talk to you later.
Hey, thank you. Dr. McDowell, can you give some advice on just cultivating friendship? How do you do friendship? How do you manage time around friendship?
One encouragement I want to give as I jump into that is, anybody watching this, don't compare yourself to anybody else. I've played that game. If I'm going to compare myself to my father, it's lose-lose. He's spoken to millions of people, written 150 books. Even Jim, I look at what Jim does. I'm like, how does he possibly accomplish so much? One of the most freeing things is just saying, I'm not going to compare myself to anybody else. I'm just going to do the best that I can do with the time and resources that God has given me. So when it's all said and done, God says, well done, my good and faithful servant. That's freeing. I read a book called Platform a number of years ago, and it was all these ideas about building your platform. When I was done, I put the book down and I physically felt sick because I thought, I can't do all of these things. I'm so overwhelmed. And then after, 2, 3, 4 weeks, I thought, you know what? I can't do everything. I'm not going to let that keep me from doing some things. So I was like, I'll restart my website. I'll start blogging, and it's just step by step getting better. So my challenge to those watch this is like, what's one thing you can do? And then try a second thing. And all of us can improve. Now, relationally, one of the things I try to do is I bring my wife on. I can. It's hard because she teaches and we have kid stuff. I try to bring one of my kids every chance I get to go speak. I have a trip coming up soon, and I'm bringing my son to like 3 cities, and we have a day off. So I email the guy. I'm like, hey, what's something fun to do in this city with my 9-year-old, just so he has fun being with dad and we build that connection. That's one thing I do. The other thing is I have friends over now and then locally where I live, and we just sit out back to the fire and talk and hang out and connect. I wish I could do that weekly or every 2 weeks, but I try to just cultivate that time with men my age. We talk, we hang out, and work on those relationships. Like Jim, I could do better at that, no question about it. But with that said, I'm blessed with a wife who tells me what she thinks. She doesn't let stuff sit and brew and resentment grow. She speaks. And that's a blessing, because when you let those little things go, it can tear a marriage and relationship apart. So I try to always be tuned in to what my wife is thinking, what she's feeling, how our relationship is, and then make changes when I need to. Do I do that perfectly? Absolutely not. I feel like I'm apologizing to my kids and my wife regularly, but she knows I listen. I'm attentive to that. And I'm not going to let anything, whether speaking, writing, YouTube, you name it, get in the way of my commitment to my family and kids when it's all said and done. I don't want to have regrets at the end. And my son is graduating high school this year. He's graduating high school. Months from now, I'll be dropping him off, heading to this gap year program. And I can honestly tell you, I don't have regrets. I've made mistakes. I don't have regrets of my relationship with him, as busy as I've been. And that feels pretty good. It feels good. That's the challenge I think Wallace and I have put together today, is be active, do things, make a difference for the kingdom, but don't lose your perspective of what matters most. What is the point of doing that? Winning the world and losing your soul?
I know we said last question, but you said before we started, you stay on a little bit longer. I think you're in front of Detective Wallace, but I know we're a little over time right now, but even as you talk about not having regret, there's probably other people on this call, maybe including myself, who do have regret about how we've managed time. And I know that as much as you are here speaking as a speaker and an author and a prof, a stud, you're also, your primary topic that you address is matters relating to the gospel, to who Jesus is. Can you comment on time management in light of the gospel, in light of who Jesus is, and how we, just time management and regrets in light of the gospel?
I guess part of the reason I don't have regrets is this something my father's taught me. He's like, I can't change the past. I'm not going to let the past beat me up. You make a mistake, you own it, and you move on. And that's just a way that I try to live my life. So in terms of regrets, even with my kids, whenever I'm on the road and they call, if I'm at dinner with somebody who's important, I will literally be like, hey, my son's calling, I got to take it. And I've been with some pretty important people. Maybe they're offended. I could care less. My kids are important to me, more important to me than somebody. Now, oftentimes what I find is people are more ministered to by that because they see what your values really are. I'll just simply say, hey, I'm on the road. My family's important to me. I got to take this. I'll be right back. So I try to prioritize my family. I guess what I would say to Daniel, when I think about my vision, what I'm doing, I can tell you, we all want a bigger platform. It's not about that for me. I see the emptiness of chasing after your tail just in terms of numbers. You'll never have enough. You'll never have enough. So for me, every video, I'm just asking myself, am I equipping Christians? Am I hopefully advancing the gospel? And sometimes I do that better than others, but that's at the heart of my motivation. That's what drives me. Now, I approach this differently than maybe Ray Comfort does or Billy Graham. That's fine because of the way I'm wired and the gifting and the calling that God has on me. But what I can tell you is that's what really motivates me when it's all said and done, the gospel. And I think if we lose track of that, we're going to end up causing a lot more harm than good to ourselves, to those we love, to our family members, to non-believers. So really, it's about the gospel. And part of that, is Jesus is like, I'm going to leave the 99 for the one. When we get motivated just by numbers, then we're losing the heart of the gospel for individuals. So you asked me at the beginning, how do I filter speaking things? Sure, part of it is like, how many people do I speak to? How many times do I speak? How far do I have to travel? How much are they paying me? There's a lot of metrics involved there, but always in the back of my mind, because it's so easy, is when podcast requests come in, when speaking requests come in, it's so easy to start valuing people through the numbers. It's an easy game to play, but the gospel's not about numbers. Jesus let the rich young ruler walk away. He's like, eat my flesh and drink my blood. And even Peter almost walked away. So all I can tell you is I'm not perfect as I do this, but I try to remember, am I advancing the gospel? Am I loving people? If not, what's the point?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Alonzo's going to close us out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. McDowell. I feel like in this seminar that was meant to really help us to manage our time well, I've also learned how to manage my life well and manage my relationships a lot better. So really appreciate all of the wisdom and the helpful correctives and challenges that you've presented all of us with. We're all going to be greater public speakers as a result. So thank you so much again. We have one last giveaway for you all. But before I say who won, I just want to encourage you one last time to join this masterclass that the Center for Public Speaking is hosting. I want you to go and register, get on it, invite a friend. This is going to bless you. This is going to enrich you. It's going to challenge you to grow, and you're going to become a more confident public speaker. So please, if you haven't registered already, please hop on and do that. It'll be a great time. I'll be there, and so many of our friends. So for our final giveaway, it is for the book entitled So the Next Generation Will Know. This is by both of our speakers today, and the winner is Mark Wagner. So congratulations, Mark. Thank you so much for everybody for tuning in wherever you are in the world. We so appreciate and value you. Thank you so much. Take care. God bless.